Hey, welcome to this week's Midweek Tip. Today, I want to spend just a minute or two on this idea of having a prepared mindset. You know, if it's not an emergency, if you're prepared for it, and that comes in all kinds of things that we deal with. If you have a flat tire and you have a spare, it's a hassle, but it's not an inconvenience. If you have life insurance and you die, it's bad, but your family's taken care of. So it's not necessarily an emergency if you are prepared for it. Now, what happens is many times as investigators, we're dealing with so many cases and so many things that, especially in the police world, when you are a detective of a smaller organization where you have to work a homicide one day and stolen tractors the next and this bad check case on the third day, and you've got all this stuff going on, and it's hard to become an expert at anything. Well, I'm not suggesting you have to be an expert, but you need to consider some things. Talking about preparedness mindset. Number one, know your limitations. Know what you can and can't do. Know where your strengths are. Are you good at interviewing child molesters or not? Are you good at interacting with decomp bodies or not? Know your limitations and know your strengths, and work within those and have other investigators work within theirs. If you're the only dog in town, then you're just going to have to learn to overcome some of your obstacles. Of course, be able to think on the fly. One of the biggest assets we have as investigators is common sense. So when you're on a scene and you do use a set of protocols and you use checklists and you work every case every time the same, sometimes you still have to be able to think on the fly and change things. So be organized, prepare for things in advance. Do use checklists and worksheets and things like that, but also be flexible. If you are too rigid, then you cannot move with the evidence that you find and becomes an emergency. It becomes a stalemate. It becomes a checkmate. You get stopped at this brick wall because now, oh no, I don't know what to do. Keep this in mind. The brain doesn't do a very good job of understanding the difference between a physical and a psychological threat, real or imagined. So if you're on a scene and all of a sudden you get presented with a lot of information and a lot of stuff that you don't understand, then you can literally freeze up. You go into a fight or flight system within your body as to, okay, am I going to have to jump in here and fight this case, or am I going to literally run away and go back to the office? Obviously, you wouldn't do that, but you run through these things in your mind of, I don't know what to do. Then anxiety builds, and as anxiety builds, you start rushing the case, shortcutting the case, and you end up failing. At the time, nobody may or may not know you're failing, but 6 months from now, when the case doesn't go to court or something happens, then yes, you're the one blamed at that point. So one of the ways to maintain a preparedness mindset is to dedicate your time and attention to learning your craft. Now, this idea of a 10,000-hour rule, some people write books to say it's true, and some people write books to say it's false. So basically what it says is, if you want to be an expert in anything, you have to practice that activity for at least 10,000 hours, okay? The best basketball players show up before practice and stay after practice. The best golfers golf multiple times a day. Also, they run through these plays in their mind. They play golf in their mind. They shoot baskets in their mind. And investigators can do the same thing. We can think through cases that aren't even real or existing as we're driving, as we're mowing the yard. And how would we respond to this? We can throw scenarios into our own imagination and think through it. That way, when you come upon something like that, your brain says, oh, we've been here before. We've worked through this before. And it certainly helps. Read books, listens to podcasts, watch TV shows that are real, like documentaries, things like that, how things work. Now, be careful not with theatrics, because we all know TV is not real. But there are some shows and some documentaries that talk about how a case was resolved or things officers did. And some of that can be beneficial. Just take that with a grain of salt. But be prepared is part of training our mind to be prepared. So remember, if you are prepared, it's not an emergency. And as an investigator, you need to do everything you can to stay in a preparedness mindset, Because when it comes right down to it, you are the one that everyone is looking to lead this investigation and to solve this case. Be prepared, because it's not an emergency if you're prepared for it.